court overruled the objection, so I may proceed.
Yes, you may.
Dr. Nakasone, we're talking about the increased risk of examiner bias if a procedure were used where a group of people were being asked to listen to a recording to see if they could recognize who was on the recording, and that the process that was used involved putting all of the people in the same room at the same time around each other when the recordings were played. Do you understand the sort of scenario there? Under that scenario, would there be an increased risk of infecting the reliability of the identification based upon the circumstances of that kind of process?
I do believe there's a increased risk of bias, listener bias already built in, because the blind test, or if we want to have multiple people came up with the conclusion which was derived independently, that would add more validity and reliability of the test. But if all of those people have a chance to sort of gauge what other people are saying, there might be definitely risk of including a bias in the end results.
And if you were advising law enforcement what to do when they have a group of people that they want to play the recording, you would recommend that they play it individually, one by one, outside the presence of the others.
I have done that, provided that kind of recommendation numerous times to the FBI agents.
I mean, I take it in your community, in your scientific community, that just makes common sense.
That is correct.
And you can't think of any reason why somebody would do it all in a group.
Object, that would call for speculation.
Any good reason why
It's not ideal way of...
It's one at a time.
Any good reason why somebody would do that is my question.
Still speculative.
I'm talking about a good reason in your community, a good reason in law enforcement for voice identification why somebody would put everybody in the same room and play the recording at once.
And it's still speculative.
Okay, for the third time sustained.
I would move defendant's FF into evidence. That's Dr. Nakasone's CV. Dr. Nakasone, it has a more detailed background of your education as well as your...
Is this a question, or you're asking the court to move it into evidence?
Well, I'm just laying the predicate quickly that it has more detail.
No, my question is, are you moving it into evidence, or are you asking Dr. Nakasone a question?
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I apologize to the court. I'm moving it into evidence.
Any objections to Defense Exhibit FF?
No, Your Honor.
It'll come into evidence as Defense Exhibit 20. If you'll hand it to the clerk, she'll go ahead and mark it, and you can continue with your questioning.
May the witness just hold on to it for a minute?
Sure.
Thank you. Dr. Nakasone, you, I take it, pride yourself because of the work you do, not just with the FBI, but your active participation in the scientific community in this area at large, to know what's going on around the world in the area of speaker identification.
Yes.
And you've already said that among the people that you work with, there is a consensus as to certain kinds of voice samples that are suitable for forensic analysis.
That is correct.
So your decision in this case wasn't based solely on your personal view about what samples are reliable or suitable and which ones aren't.
I strongly believe my opinion is supported by my colleagues in the scientific communities.
Let's talk about, first of all, the suitability of the samples you have in this case, which boils down to the the screaming, the cries for help on that recording. When you evaluated it, I know from what you said that you took the total amount of the speech and you said that was about 18 seconds, give or take,
That is correct.
out of the 45-second period from when the screaming started until the apparent gunshot.
That is correct.
So you distilled that to 18 seconds, and then when you removed the, would it be fair to say the masking noise or overlapped speech, you had considerably less to work with. In fact, it was under 3 seconds.
That's correct, 2.53 seconds.
And are you saying that it was only 2.35 seconds that could in any way be considered suitable? And I don't mean suitable that it was suitable, but that's what you had to start with to make that decision.
Yes, that was cleanest area if we attempt to do any kind of analysis, not for just voice ID, but any kind of analysis.
When you say that you would like 30 seconds or a minute up to 3 minutes of speech for an analysis, are you talking about normal speech or screaming speech?
Normal, natural conversational speech.
And why is that? What's this notion of phonetically balanced speech?
The computer takes statistics of dynamic variation of somewhere around 1,000, a little bit over 1,000 different speech features. And to formulate sufficiently statistically significant models, it takes the speech sample which contains very extensive phonetic contents. Say like in English, thank you very much. In English, there are 44 different sounds. We call them phonemes. And before those 44 phonemes to occur reasonably, it takes for a while. One word maybe produce 3 different phonemes. So like when I say, S is one sound, A is another. Last part of the Y sound or E sound will be third phoneme. And say someone says help. You have about 3 different kind of sounds, 3 phonemes, H, L, and the P sound. Now, for the entire phonemes, reasonably, comprehensively, and before it happens, we need reasonable speech durations. And that varies depending upon the vocabulary of the individual use. And by doing empirical studies, we determined that somewhere around 30-second speech samples would carry well-balanced phonetic contents.
Are you saying 30 seconds of what you've characterized as normal speech?
That is called in conversational speech.
Not conversational speech,
Yes.
not someone yelling help over and over for 30 seconds.
If someone continues to yell with the same phonetic content for 30 seconds, we can still count as one word or 3 phonemes. And that's far less than what is being required to do meaningful scientific analysis.
So when you talk about the duration, the 30 seconds, and I think you said maybe sometimes even if it's only 15 seconds, maybe, or 16 seconds, maybe you can do a voice analysis. If it gets to be 14 or 10, it's very questionable. You're talking about the duration of normal speech that would contain as many of these phonemes that you're talking about.
That is correct. Let me be a little bit clear about the distinction between 30 seconds and 15 seconds or so. If I continue talking like this for 30 seconds or so, and then record it, And then when we analyze, my 30-second speech sample contains a lot of pauses in between, hesitation pause or a syntactic pause. And those in the pause doesn't carry too much information. And after those were removed, you will be end up with having core or bulk of speech informations. And that would become usually either to 70% or 50% range. So if you have 30 seconds of natural spoken speech, it's fair to predict you're going to have in 30 seconds. 15 seconds. Mm-hmm. But you have to measure that after you complete this extraction of the silence and pause areas. And if you have, say, 15 seconds, probably examiner would feel comfortable going to analysis. But standard operating procedure mandates, if it's, say, a 10 second or so, examiner has to call it quit. Mm-hmm. Because our empirical study indicates the error rate would go up if we utilize too short of speech samples.
So if I hear what you're saying, if you have 30 seconds of normal speech, by the time you get rid of the pauses and hesitations and such, you may have only 15 seconds left that you can then analyze.
That's the typical scenario we get into. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Is there any amount, well, let me back up first. When you listen to recordings such as the one in this case, are you trying to reach a decision whether the person is under high stress or even in a life-threatening situation?
We assess whether it's normal or deviates from normal range, and examiners are usually have been already exposed to variety of recording conditions, and he is allowed to make that judgment.
You heard the calls and you heard the screams in this case yourself. You did the work.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And did you consider the person screaming to be in a life-threatening situation?
Yes, it was uttered under extreme emotional state. Facing that situation?
Yes.
Very extreme, emotional state.
Does that make it extremely challenging for you whether there can be any kind of further analysis at all?
Actually, along with our report, we talked to Tampa FBI field agents who submitted this case because he asked. I recommended him not to attempt to record an acted screaming voice for this particular case.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow what you said. You recommended that there be another recording or not?
No, I recommended FBI agent that he would not attempt to record an acted screaming voice for this particular case.
Let's help the jury follow this a little bit. You told the agent not to attempt to do a reenactment recording for use in this case. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Voice comparison, I take it, while you haven't said it precisely today, is once you get your unknown sample processed and prepared and ready to analyze, the analysis is by comparing it with a known sample of a person's voice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So you don't ever do the analysis just listening to the one unknown voice on its own, correct?
When we were giving only unknown voice, we are not doing any voice comparison. However, we will be evaluating whether this particular unknown voice has is sufficient information in it for us to do future analysis if we were given another voice samples we have to compare with.
So your decision to tell the agent out of the Tampa office basically don't bother trying to do a reenactment was because no reenactment under basically such different circumstances could possibly give you an exemplar worthy of a reliable comparison.
We believe it would be extremely difficult to recreate the same situation. It's not just, the scream voice, it just doesn't have a, raised pitch. Something else is changing too. Scientists believe that potentially there might be some physiological or anatomical structure could be different. When they are different under specific conditions, this resonance mechanism can change too. And since it's not really easy to recreate the same situation, we don't believe as scientific communities we can recreate these unique situations. It doesn't happen every day. It's difficult.
Screaming in this context is, you're saying, physiologically very, very different than talking but really loud.
That is correct. It's a completely different type. And the scientists do not know exactly how they are different.
So there's really, if I hear you correctly, there's no amount of screaming speech, whether it's 2.53 seconds or 10 seconds or maybe 30 minutes, that would be suitable for the kind of voice comparison analysis that we are able to do now in the current state of the art.
That is correct.
You also said, I believe, that because, I'll connect the dots here if I heard you correctly, because of the physiological changes that come about when someone screams under very high stress in a life-threatening situation, for example, that it has such a profound impact on the way they sound that you can't in any way reliably say how old the person is that's screaming.
I don't think it would be possible to determine the age by listening to that extreme type of voice.
So in other words, the screams that you heard on that 911 call could be made by a 27-year-old, a 35-year-old, or even a 50-year-old man under similar circumstances.
Under similar circumstance, it's very, very challenging, and scientific community may not attempt, not only myself, attempt to guess or estimate age of the person who is screaming.
And you can't do that in this case.
I did not attempt.
And you didn't attempt because, based upon what you know from your own work, what you know from being a member of the scientific community, that to do so would be a fool's errand, that you can't come up with a reliable scientific opinion because it's screaming, someone screaming for their life.
In my opinion, that's the consensus among the scientific group or members.
I think with all of that, what you're saying is science really doesn't help us in this case figure out who's screaming.
Unfortunately, that is correct.
The best chance, if any, in your mind would be based upon lay witnesses that have familiarity with the voice of either George Zimmerman or Trayvon Martin or both?
That is my opinion. Yes, correct.
Are there still the same challenges because it's very limited speech, because it's under high duress, because it's in the background, and the kinds of things that you've talked about already?
Layperson of familiar voice recognition would be the best, here. But as you mentioned, yes, there is a challenge, and that challenge would be characterized by the fact that this person has a familiarity. The question is, would this person is in possession of the information about specific perceptual features that they can extract from that yelling and screaming, to the same features they can retrieve from their memory about their loved ones and voice who were producing the audio information under the same situations.
So the same situation is still an issue. In other words, you're saying if they can connect something they hear in the recording with something that they know is familiar, that's the best chance you're going to get in this case of someone being able to identify the voice.
It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but somewhat, under similar conditions. Yes.
Would you urge caution to this jury as well in that sort of analysis, trying to figure out lay witness testimony that say they can identify the voice because of all the things you've talked about? Would you urge caution in listening to the opinions of the lay witnesses and suggest it really needs to be in the context of the case?
Judge, I'm going to object. He's asking him to comment on what the jury should consider.
The judge will give the instructions to the jury at the end of the case when the evidence is complete, and those are the instructions that the jury will follow. Your objection is sustained.
May I have just one moment, Judge? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Max.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Please, Your Honor. So, Doctor, what I understand you to say by specific perceptual features is the best type of person to make these sorts of judgments, even on a sample like this, is someone who's heard the potential speaker under sort of similar circumstances.
That is correct.
So they've heard them upset or in distress before.
Yes.
As far, would you say that they would have that kind of listener would have an advantage over someone who's never heard the person upset or in great distress before?
No, that's fine. I'm sorry.
I think the person who has heard same features from both voices would be more reliable than individual who claims he is familiar with certain people, but everything what he heard from this particular person are coming from a normal type of conversation.
Thank you. You referenced talking about standards of desiring 30 seconds or that sort of thing of speech and words. That was as it relates to, and I just want to make sure that we're very clear on this point, all of those standards and things like that, those were as it relates to your desire to conduct a computer-assisted or an algorithm-assisted examination, not the sort of lay listener type approach. Am I right about that?
That is correct.
Okay. And as far as this idea of, because before I leave that point, I think I heard you say earlier that, for example, if you were talking on the phone with your mom, it might only take you a word or two.
That is correct.
Okay.
Doesn't take too long, a few seconds.
And as I want to go back to this idea of examiner bias and why you as a scientist try to avoid it. As I understand it, in an ideal, you try to make things as a scientist as ideal as possible, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you work in, you attempt to control as many variables as you can. Do you think that law enforcement techniques or practices or things of that nature mirror what should go on in a laboratory?
No, we do not have any saying about what they do unless I'm specifically requested to give them guidance, but otherwise, usually, say like we prefer the voices will be recorded by a high fidelity microphone tape recorder, but most of the voices we receive were recorded by a variety of random recording devices. We take them all.
And just so I'm clear on this concept of what you refer to as the potential bias, again, you were talking in context of having a scientist conduct what you called an unfamiliar voice analysis, the computer-assisted or that type of identification where you don't know or have never heard the supposed speaker's voice before, right?
Yes.
Okay.
However, though, that happens also in the voice lineup situation. We recommend to FBI agents when we asked.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sorry.
May the witness finish his answer,
Sorry, I
please?
didn't mean to interrupt you, Doctor. Were you done yet?
No, he wasn't done yet.
Please avoid your comments.
Yes, Judge.
Go ahead, Doctor, you may continue.
I said the effort guide them to remove any bias effect happens not only to the technical analysis for unfamiliar voices, but also it is equally important. The same, safeguard against bias would be as important in the familiar voice recognition as well. To remove risk of bias and also to improve the credibility of the results of this, identification procedure.
If I heard you about voice lineups, you're talking about a situation where possibly a victim of a crime is asked to come down and listen to potential suspects say what the perpetrator said? Is that what you're talking about, a voice lineup?
Yeah, that would be part of that too.
Okay.
But sometimes it happens. There's not enough, quality in the very lengthy, voice recordings happening in the, federal cases. And I recommend only thing they can do would be to find somebody who are familiar with the voices, and advise them if they have, say, 3 or 4 potential individuals who presumably familiar with the voice, advise them to have each listen to the recorded voice of the target individual separately, one at a time. That's part of the my recommendation. Okay.
If we're talking about the potential for bias, that is exactly what it is, right? A potential?
Yes.
Okay. If I were to have you and another person familiar with your mother's voice listen to it together, are you worried that that would compromise your ability to recognize someone with whose voice you are so familiar?
Well, there's always a chance.
Okay.
I might get compromised.
When you say there's a chance,
Yes.
it certainly doesn't mean it's going to happen, does it?
Objection, leading.
Ma'am. If two voices at hand we have to compare are so obviously different, so obviously different or so obviously same, the chance of examiner bias might be lesser than the situation in which two voices sound alike or very difficult to analyze. And I think the examiner's human, they have a tendency to sort of follow the leader. And that happens, and the bias issue is a very serious, topic embedded within the scientific working group for speaker recognition as well. It's a very serious issue.
Does bias work both ways? And by that I mean, if you go into it not wanting or assuming that you're not hearing the same voice, does it?
It can go either way.
Okay. As far as familiar voice identification goes, understanding the frailties of this particular tape, understanding that what you've said is the more scientific computer-assisted method doesn't provide us with enough here. Did I understand your testimony to
Yeah,
be?
that is correct. Because the computer, there's no way for the computer to contain all sorts of features coming from the voice it's analyzing. It's just a one-shot analysis.
So if you've only got that one shot, the best person to do it is someone who's heard that voice under similar circumstances.
That is correct.
Thank you. No other questions?
Very briefly. At the FBI lab, you don't limit your analysis just to the computer, the automated speaker recognition. Is that correct?
That is correct. Our approach is called hybrid approach. It's a method of automated speaker recognition by computer supervised by a trained examiner. And this means the numbers regurgitated by the computer alone cannot be utilized as a source of a report. The examiner will be conducting his examination independently from computers, because human can extract some features that the computers cannot, and vice versa. So always those two components moving together. It's called automated speaker recognition with human in the loop. That's another term.
You always have a trained examiner listening, in other words.
That is correct.
And your examiners are trained in the various methodologies available for speaker recognition.
That is correct. The computer cannot really assess whether input and voices are produced under inference of article, or computer cannot tell right now whether a person was happy, sad, or voice was produced under abnormal duress. So to detect all of those, we have to depend upon the trained examiners. So these two components must go hand in hand in our practice at FBI.
You mentioned that the spectrographic analysis was a method that was employed more in the past than currently. And the FBI does not currently use that approach. Is that correct?
It was used up to last year. FBI modernized the speaker recognition technology on May 15, 2012. So examiners would not use spectrographic voice comparison anymore for the purpose of voice comparisons. It's been replaced by the advanced modern computer software.
Mm-hmm. Based upon your knowledge that the event in this case occurred on February 26, 2012, is there any methodology that you're familiar with that would include the oral perceptual methodology, the spectrographic analysis, or the automated speaker recognition software approach that the FBI now uses that would be suitable for analyzing the screams that we had in this case?
No.
Thank you, Doctor. That's all I have.
Will you redirect?
Suitable for-
Redirect?
Suitable for scientifically generating a report under your protocol. When you say there's no suitable methodology, is that what you mean?
Yes,
Okay.
there was no technology or scientific device, algorithm, software were suitable to analyze the particular, voice we had. But that would not preclude familiar voice recognition by the individuals who are familiar with the voice.
Thank you.
Thank you. May Dr. Nakasone be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, sir. Is the redacted copies that are going to be introduced
That is
into
correct,
evidence?
Your Honor. That is the only part that will be introduced into evidence. Some of them are audio and some of them are video. No, that's correct. There are transcripts, but they're not being introduced because you can understand what's being said.
Okay. Thank you. Are we ready to bring the jury in?
We are, Your Honor.
Okay, come on. We'll bring them in.
Jurors present, Your Honor.
Please be seated. The state will please call your next witness.
I would call Doris Singleton.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Thank you.
You may proceed.
Can you state your name for the record, please?
Doris Singleton, Singleton.
What is your occupation, ma'am?
I'm a police officer of the Sanford Police Department.
And are you assigned to a particular unit?
I'm assigned to the Neighborhood Response Unit.
How long have you been with the Sanford Police Department?
December will be 9 years.
And what have been your previous assignments prior to the one you're in right now?
I've also been on road patrol. I've been a school resource officer. I've been an investigator with the Narcotics Unit.
How long were you an investigator with the narcotics unit?
About 3 to 4 years,
Okay. And how long have you been in your current position?
since February.
Okay. Prior to that, were you with the narcotics unit?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And prior to being with the Sanford Police Department, did you have any law enforcement experience?
Out of college, many years ago, I was a parole officer for 2 years with the state.
Can you briefly tell us about your education background, ma'am?
I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Florida in criminal justice with a minor in legal studies. I also went to the Probation Officer Academy after college. That was in '92, and I've been to the Police Academy.
Okay.
And then we have
Okay.
training as we go along within the police department.
All right. I want to draw your attention back to February of last year, that is 2012. What was your assignment at that time?
I was assigned to the narcotics unit as an investigator.
I want to draw your attention to Sunday evening, February 26th of 2012. Were you on duty or off duty that evening?
I was off duty.
Did you get a call to assist an investigator regarding a shooting that occurred at the retreat at Twin Lakes?
Yes, I received a call from Sergeant Santiago.
Okay. And how was it that you were off duty? You got called to assist him, I guess? Did there need to be an additional investigator, or how did that come about?
Well, the sergeants within the investigative unit have an on-call status, and they take turns. So that particular week, Sergeant Santiago, who is my supervisor for the narcotics unit, was the on-call sergeant for any investigative call-outs. And so he called me to assist.
And were you assigned to assist investigator Chris Serino?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And was he the lead investigator?
Chris Serino is the lead investigator, yes.
When you were called that evening, did you actually go to the crime scene itself, that is, to retreat at Twin Lakes, or did you go elsewhere?
I did not ever go out to the crime scene that night. I went straight to the police department.
And were you requested by somebody to go to the Sanford Police Department?
Yes, sir. I believe it was Sergeant Santiago that asked me to go there.
Okay. And for the purpose of doing what at the police department?
I wasn't told, I believe, until I got there.
Okay. So you were directed specifically not to go to the scene, but to go to the actual police department?
Yes, I believe at that time I was already told that Zimmerman was already en route to the police department. Of course, I didn't know his name at the time.
When you arrived at the Sanford Police Department, was George Zimmerman already present there?
Yes.
Okay. If you could, do you see George Zimmerman in the courtroom today?
Yes.
And
Yes,
is
I do. He's
that the
standing.
person that just stood up?
Yes, sir.
Trying to directly reflect the witness, identify the defendant?
The record will so reflect.
When you came into contact with the defendant, George Zimmerman, was he in an interview room, ma'am?
Yes, sir. George Zimmerman was in an interview room.
And were there any officers present there?
Not in the same room, but in a room where they could observe him. This particular interview room got a two-way mirrored glass where you can see into the room, but he wouldn't have been able to see out of the room. And Officer Adam Johnson and Officer Timmy Smith were there
Okay.
on the other side of the glass watching him.
Yes, ma'am. You briefly described the interview room. How big would you say it is about?
I would say it's maybe 8 feet by 5 feet. I'm not really good at measurement, so.
Okay. And is there a table and chairs in the interview room?
Yes, a table probably similar to the size of the table I'm sitting at now.
Okay. Did you end up talking to the defendant, George Zimmerman?
Yes, I did talk to him that night.
And was your interview with the defendant, George Zimmerman, recorded in any way, ma'am?
Yes, it was.
And can you briefly tell us how it was recorded?
It was recorded on just a voice recorder that they give us.
Okay. Does that room have the capability of video recording?
It does,
And can you tell us why it was not videotaped?
because I didn't know how to activate that system.
Now, even though by law an officer is not required to inform a person being interviewed that they're recording the interview, did you in fact inform the defendant that you were recording that interview?
I did inform him of that, and I placed also the recorder where he could see that it was being recorded as well.
Did you advise the defendant, George Zimmerman, of his constitutional rights, or what's referred to Miranda rights?
I did.
And did you use a form in doing that, ma'am?
Yes, I did.
Ma'am, I'm going to show you what's been introduced into evidence, State's Exhibit 174. I believe there's no objection.
That's correct. Thank you.
If I may approach the witness, Your Honor.
Me.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 174. Do you recognize said exhibit?
I do.
What do you recognize State's Exhibit 174 to be, ma'am?
This is the Miranda warning card that I read from that night and that I signed as well as George Zimmerman signed that night.
And was that process of informing the defendant of his constitutional rights or his Miranda rights recorded as part of the recording that you took of the interview of the defendant?
Yes, the reading of the rights as well as you can hear me having him sign it.
Okay. Did you ask the defendant whether he understood his rights, ma'am?
Yes, I did.
And did he indicate whether he did or not?
He said that he understood.
And did he agree to waive his rights and talk to you?
He did.
Did you ask him questions as part of the interview, and did he respond to your questions?
Yes.
Okay. At any time during the investigation, did you threaten the defendant in any way in order to get him to make a statement?
No, I did not.
At any time during the interview, did you promise him anything in order to get him to make a statement, ma'am?
No, I didn't promise him anything.
In your prior experience as a police officer in the Sanford Police Department, have you had occasion to come into contact with people under the influence of alcohol and/or drugs?
Yes, very much.
Did the defendant appear to be under the influence of alcohol and/or drugs to the point where he was incapable of understanding what was going on?
I did not get any indication that he was under any influence of anything.
When he spoke to you, did you have any problems understanding him when he spoke to you?
No, he spoke clearly.
And did he have any problems understanding you when you asked him questions?
He never said that he misunderstood anything I said to him.
When you came into contact with him, did you notice some injuries on him?
Yes.
Okay. And did you discuss those with him, whether he needed any medical treatment or not?
Briefly, yes.
Okay. And did he say he did need medical treatment?
He said that he didn't, from what I recall when I first walked into the room. Later on in the interview, he said he was not sure.
Okay. And did you discuss that with him in terms of providing him an opportunity, if he so desired, to get medical treatment?
Yes.
And did he decline that?
Yes.
Okay. Did he complain of an injury when you were speaking of it, like, my head is, just, I can't think, I'm in pain, I just can't think? Did he ever express that to you?
No, he never said those things in that way.
If he had done so, would you have interrupted or stopped the interview and had him checked out in some way?
If he had asked at all for any reason, no matter how he was showing himself, that he wanted to go to the hospital, I would have made that happen.
Ma'am, when you came into contact with him, was that the evening of February 26th of 2012, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you recall approximately what time you came into contact with him?
Probably somewhere between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock, but that would be a guess.
Okay. And when you first came into contact with the defendant, you described, did he have some blood on his nose?
He had crusted blood underneath his nose.
Okay. Did he also have some blood on the back of his head?
Yes, that was actively bleeding.
Okay. And did he use some tissues to stop that from bleeding?
Yes, we have a tissue box on the table in the interview rooms, and he was using those tissues.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time I would formally move into evidence. I apologize, let me make sure I've got the State's Exhibit 178, which is the defendant's interview with Miss Singleton, Officer Singleton. It's 178, I believe there's no objection.
Okay,
That's correct.
it'll come into evidence.
There is an instruction the court may address at some point.
Not as to this one. Ma'am, you've had an opportunity to review the recording that was taken of the defendant, the audio recording, is that correct?
The interviews with myself, yes.
Yes. Okay. The interview, please start. The interview itself is you asking Mr. Zimmerman questions, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. During the interview that you conducted of Mr. Zimmerman, you had not been to the scene itself, to the shooting scene, is that correct?
No, I was not at the scene.
So you were not able to quiz him or to challenge him as to what he said because you were not aware of the facts, I'm assuming?
Yes, I essentially knew nothing going in to speak to him.
What was the purpose in terms of interviewing him then?
To get a statement from him.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, the date is February 22nd, 2012. It's Investigator Singleton. I'm sitting in an interview room at the Sanford Police Department with...
Now, just to make sure the record, you stated on that February 22nd. In fact, Mr. Zimmerman corrected you and pointed out that it was actually February 26th. Is that correct?
Yes, I misspoke. It was February 26th.
Okay, thank you.
George Michael Zimmerman, in reference to an event that happened out at 2831 Retreat View Circle. I'm going to read you your Miranda rights because obviously you're here, and you are free to go right now because we got to figure out what's going on.
Sure.
You haven't been charged with a crime yet, but you are here and you can't go until we figure out what really happened. And so I'm going to ask to talk to you about it, but I got to give you your Miranda warning so that you understand.
Sure.
Okay? Okay, you have the right to remain silent. You don't have to talk to me. Okay? Anything you say can't be used against you in court. Meaning, if you say something that proves your guilt, we can use it to prove your guilt. Okay, you understand that? Okay. You have the right to have an attorney present now or at any time during questioning. You understand that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you without any cost. Okay. If you talk to me, you have the right to stop answering questions or speak to an attorney at any time. Okay. Do you understand these rights?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you want to talk to me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What I need you to do here is put your signature and just date it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And this is being recorded, this interview. Okay.
2/21.
What did I say it was? Today is the 26th. I'm going to sign right here. And I witness you sign this cord. And I'll put the case number later because I know part of it, but I'm not sure. Okay. I haven't been out there, okay? So I just want you to tell me.
When you say you haven't been out there, what were you referring to, ma'am?
To the crime scene.
Thank you.
Before this incident, everything you know, why you were there, and all this stuff. First of all, did you live at this address here?
No.
Okay, so this address in your license that says 1874 Valleywood Way in Lake Mary, you no longer live there?
Correct.
Okay. Do you live in the complex or neighborhood where this occurred?
Yes,
Okay. What is your address?
1950.
This is the correct one?
Yes, ma'am.
So you live at 1950 Retreat View Circle. I'm just gonna keep quiet, and you tell me the story. You tell me what happened tonight, okay?
Just tonight.
Yeah, or whatever led up to this. Anything you want to tell me about what happened and why it ended up, what it ended up to where this boy got shot. Okay.
The neighborhood has had a lot of crimes. My wife saw our neighbors get broken into, and she got scared.
Are you talking about the residents or vehicles?
The residents,
Okay.
while it was occupied. So I decided to start a neighborhood watch program in my neighborhood.
Okay, what is the name of the neighborhood?
Retreat at Twin Lakes.
Is it the little two-story condos or
The townhouses.
townhouses? Okay. Retreat
Retreat at Twin Lakes.
at Twin Lakes. Okay. Okay, you started a
Neighborhood watch.
neighborhood watch. Okay.
With Wendy Dorval, Sergeant Hertz, Officer Buchanan, and I'm the coordinator. And there's been a few times where I've seen a suspicious person in the neighborhood. We call the police, the non-emergency line, and these guys always get away.
Okay. What made them suspicious?
This gentleman in particular, I'd never seen him in the neighborhood. I know all the residents. It was raining out, and he was leisurely walking, taking his time, looking at all the houses.
Okay.
When I drove by, he stopped and looked at me.
Had you seen him before?
Never.
Never? Okay.
I know all the kids in my neighborhood, all the adults in my neighborhood. And like I said, it was raining, and he was just walking casually, not like he was trying to get out of the rain.
Tell us what happened right there.
Sergeant Santiago was still at the crime scene, and he had chirped my Nextel phone,
Okay.
and he wanted me to find out from George if there was, he wanted to find out from George Zimmerman and wanted me to ask him if there was any phone numbers or contact persons that he could locate or give information on to see if there was video surveillance of the gate as to which cars come through the gate.
Okay.
Been an interview. Yes.
Is that Sergeant Santiago asking you something, and that's why it's not clearly coming out on the recording?
Right, because it's coming into my phone and I have the phone to my ear.
Okay. And he's asking you if there's a tape or video at the gate as far as viewing the cars coming in and out?
Yes, he wants me to find out from George Zimmerman if he knows that information.
Okay.
You know if there's any tape or recordings of vehicles that come in and out of that neighborhood?
Last time they were down, the cameras
It
were
has
broken.
the ability, but you don't know if it's running.
Correct.
He says they do have video, but he doesn't know if it's working right now because last he knew it wasn't working. Do you know who the contact is for that video?
Leland Management in Orlando. And his name is Kent Taylor.
Okay. What are we talking about there in terms of contact? Somebody that be able to, well, tell me what you mean by that.
My question to George was if he knew somebody who could get that information that Santiago was asking for. Sergeant Santiago wanted to know who could he contact in order to find out how to get the surveillance from a camera if it existed.
So you're asking the defendant in terms of a contact person, so Santiago can contact that person?
Right, I guess he would assume that George would know, being part of the neighborhood watch, and
Okay.
he would know who to contact for that type of surveillance video.
Thank you.
Kent Taylor. You don't have
I
a phone.
did my cell phone.
What is Mr. Zimmerman doing now? Actually looking through his cell phone, the defendant?
Yes, if at some point I go out of the room and I come back in and I give him the phone so that he can look up the phone number that Sergeant Santiago is requesting.
Okay. Meaning the defendant's phone, Mr. Zimmerman's phone?
Yes, his cell phone.
Okay.
It's Leland Management. So for Leland Management in Orlando, the contact person is Kent Taylor, but he doesn't have the phone number on him.
When Sergeant Santiago asked you to find out the 43, what did he mean by that?
Get the information. 43 is just a 10 code for information. But I haven't gone out of the room yet, based on what I just heard.
Okay.
Sometimes I have to do this. Do you know where your cell phone is right now?
They took it from me.
With these officers? Okay. I'll be right back. Would you mind getting his phone number
No.
off your phone if you have it?
Now, at this point, are you asking the defendant to find or look in his phone and get the phone number that he just talked about?
Yes, I went and retrieved the phone, brought it back to the room, handed it to him, and asked him if he wouldn't mind looking up the phone number that was being requested.
That's his email. 407-781-1181. HOA president might also know.
Okay, what's his name?
Don, D-O-N,
Mhm.
it's 407-790-0054. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
What's going on now? Are you relaying that information to Sergeant Santiago?
Yes, I believe I walked out of the room and relayed that information to him through my Nextel outside of the room.
So even though you walked out of the room, the recording was still going on?
Yes, the recorder remained inside the room.